Before we begin, I'd like to mention that this episode of Inside IASB addresses student participation on school boards in an advisory capacity. This type of student participation has been authorized, but not required, by the Illinois School Code for almost 20 years. Section 5.10-1, subsection C of the school code provides that a board of school directors may appoint a student to the board to serve in an advisory capacity. The member shall serve for a term as determined by the board. The board may not grant the student member any voting privileges, but may consider the student member as an advisor. The student member may not participate in or attend any executive session of the board. We realize that Senate Bill 3773 was filed this past legislative session, and that bill would have required districts with a high school to appoint a student school board member who would be allowed to participate in closed session and have voting rights. IASB had significant concerns with that piece of legislation, as we believe it is inappropriate for students to participate in closed session and for them to have voting privileges. Senate Bill 3773 did not advance this past legislative session. IASB does, however, support school boards in their efforts to incorporate student voice in appropriate and meaningful ways, including having a student participate on the board in an advisory capacity, as the school code currently allows. You're listening to Inside IASB, a podcast series dedicated to informing and encouraging Illinois school board members. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Isaac Warren. I'm the Assistant Director of Digital Communications at the Illinois Association of School Boards. And with me today, I have Lori Grant from our Lombard office. Hey, Lori.
Hi, Isaac.
Could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do at IASB?
You bet. I'm my official role is Associate Executive Director of Board Development. So I get to lead a wonderful team of wonderful individuals, and we build content to bring to our board members. And I used to, prior to this role, I was a field services director. So I worked with a whole lot of board members out there, and this is a great place to be.
Today, we're going to be talking about bringing student voices to the board table. I think this is a topic we're very passionate about, and we've had some events at conference to kind of encourage this. And I think that it's good to remember that there's more to board work than just the adults talking, I guess, to say, lack for a better word.
Absolutely. I am passionate about this. I was a teacher for 25 years. So this is something I was the student council advisor. So I got to, work with these high school kids and middle school kids too, by the way, who are just extraordinary and have so many great things to share and to say. And, again and again, I would hear board members say, we're in it for the kids. This is about the kids. And let's remember it's about the kids. And they really, truly do believe that. But let's put our money where our mouth is, right? Then bring those kids to the table and let's hear their voice. And many states do that. And I realized once I got into this role and did a little research that in Illinois, this is not something that is common in Illinois. We have 850-ish school districts. And as far as we can tell, 18 or 20 actually have student board members at the table, which is surprising to me. But then again, it's not, because it is hard. This is really complex work, and our volunteer board members, they have so much that they have to get accomplished at that table. So you have to be really intentional about bringing students to the board table. But many had never even thought about it until we started bringing this to the forefront. So I'm really excited about the direction that it's going. And I think that once board members consider this, maybe bringing students to the table more than just having them stand in front of the board and give a report, but actually include them as a real board member, I think it will make a great difference for everyone at the district.
So what do you think that is? What would you, in your opinion, say is the reason for the disparity of student representation on the school board?
I think it is Illinois specific.
Okay.
So okay. Okay, so in Illinois, with only 20 school districts that have student board members, this is new. But in other states, this has been going on for decades. Some states even have legislated, it's mandated to have a student board member at the table. So it is new. You want it to be authentic, and you want the board to really encourage these kids to be there. So the school board needs to be ready to bring them to the table, which we have a lot of guidance for. So it's new, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Well, why should a board encourage student voices at board meetings, and maybe not even necessarily bring on a student as a board member, just having them even present at the meeting to chime in?
Absolutely. Well, student voice is not a new idea. Student voice in the classroom, student voice in their own education. But bringing student voice to the board table, giving that perspective of the kids that are out there living, eating, breathing their work every single day. And it is really, truly is different when it's coming from the student's voice, and hearing them having representation at the table. And when the board takes the time to listen, and even more importantly, act based on the feedback they've gotten from the children who they're directly impacting, it is hugely impactful. There are the districts that I have worked with. Oswego 308 is one of them. Leiden 212, worked with those students in particular in our joint annual conference, doing a panel with them and having those kids speak to the adults in the room was absolutely mesmerizing. And those kids, when they began to talk, you could hear a pin drop in the room. And it was palpable. And they had so much to say that was so deep and meaningful. And when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what could be more inclusive than bringing the students in that you're making decisions for?
Yeah. And your example kind of leads me to my next question, which was if you had any examples of stories or boards that have provided a space for students and what that implementation looked like.
Right. A really great example that we've worked with a lot in the past couple of years is Oswego 308. They have developed a process to not only bring students to the board table, but they also have a student ambassador program that these representatives to the board also work with the larger student body. And so they're getting input and feedback from the larger student body to bring back. And they've done a great job in developing the application process for bringing students to the table. They also have a school board member who is the direct liaison to these students, and they meet outside of the board meetings, and to help orient them. Board work is not easy, and to bring a student to understand that, to have that board member to connect with them was very helpful. So that is one district that has been very open to allowing us to share their work, and has been very open for districts to come and work with them as well. So, yeah.
So if you have a student who wants to serve on the school board, for example, I'm assuming they have to go through the same process, like for the elections process, as their contemporary board members. Is that correct?
Actually, no. So the student board members are not elected by the general public, right? So the board members, they go through the election process, the adults, but the students, that's more internal. There are things that a student board member can and cannot do. So, one, of course, they can attend all the open meetings as anyone can, right? But a student board member cannot attend a closed session meeting. So there's still important pieces that the adults really have to own that the kids cannot be a part of. Students cannot vote because that is that's the role of the elected official. So student board members are not elected by the community, but maybe there's an election process through their school leadership teams, through student council, that kind of thing, depending on how the district runs it. Students they can openly express their opinions at the board table. And that's absolutely encouraged because that's the reason they're there in the first place. They can be appointed to subcommittees. They can be on committees. They can't get closed session notes or closed session minutes. So that closed session piece is the main thing that they cannot participate in. Some boards I've heard, because even though the students can't vote and it's not official, they can ask for, I guess, their opinion. If you were going to vote, how would you have voted on this? And sometimes that can guide their vote as well. So, yeah, they can also, the student board member can also attend other functions of the board. So if they're doing a workshop on goal setting, it's highly encouraged that you bring students to that table if you're having the stakeholders that are in those discussions. So they can pretty much do anything a board member can do, but they cannot vote and they can't go into closed session.
Gotcha. So that completely makes sense that the board is having a student. It is a representative of the student voice collectively, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And that's the goal, is for that to have that inclusive representation. And when that happens, there's a couple things that happen that in talking to boards who've brought kids to the table. Number one, it's two-way. It's great for the board itself because they have to really model great behavior. And sometimes boards, there's been moments in the past few years that it's been a struggle for boards. There's been some very, very challenging times. And when there's students sitting right there with them, it checks you. It makes you think that, wow, I have a 17-year-old sitting next to me. I need to be a really great role model for that person. So board behavior changes a little bit, often for the better. The other thing that happens for the students at the table is it encourages their civic engagement. And that is something that we, of course, as educators, we want our future board members to know what they're getting into. And it really is a great education piece for our students because they understand what it means for that civic engagement, that this is a volunteer position, that really important decisions are being made at that table that impacts their future. So it's really two-way. It's great for the student to learn and to be educated, but it's also great for the board because their behaviors change and they become more student focused.
That's especially important, especially when the national spotlight has really focused on the roles of school boards during and post-COVID, when there was a lot of national attention about how these meetings were being conducted and what was going on.
That's right. It's been a very challenging time in our country, particularly for school boards. And that has been the biggest takeaway I've heard over and over again, is how it has changed their board, how they are much more reflective and considerate as to how will this really impact the students that we're making these decisions for.
Absolutely. And when you have a student who wants to serve on the school board, that's something they have to take into consideration.
That's right. That's right. And, there are boards right now in Illinois where there's a 19-year-old on the school board, just graduated from high school. There are several school board members in their early 20s. So this is the new generation, right?
Yes.
This is next gen school board, and these high school kids, and in some cases middle school, 8th graders especially. That's our next generation. These are our future board members.
It is really cool seeing the incoming generations being more involved in the civics process and involved in their community, and really trying to make an influence into how things are being run and giving their opinions and having their voice being heard.
It's great for both sides, for both parties. Absolutely.
Completely agree. So how does ISB specifically encourage boards to provide a space for students?
Sure. Well, this is new again. We have created some content for board members, and it's actually on our website. It's bringing student representatives to the school board table, and it's a 4-page document that outlines what student student representatives can and can't do, the policy that covers this. There is a policy, and that's listed in this document. And then there's a whole list of bullet points of kind of a checklist to determine if your board really is ready, because you can't just bring them on without thinking this through. You must be really intentional about it, because it will change perhaps the way your agenda is formed to be inclusive, to bring those kids to the table. So there's a checklist included in that. And then there's a list of kind of best practices once you've brought that student to the table, things that you should do once they get there. Just like you would orient a brand new board member with new board member orientation, you do the same thing with that student board member. And the idea of having a mentor or a liaison from the board to those students is pretty crucial as well. Yeah, so we do have that document that's available on our website. That's one way. Another thing we've done at Joint Annual Conference the past 2 years, we've done a panel with these school districts who are successful and have figured this out, have done the process to share. And we also had a Friday focus event this past year at our 2023 Joint Annual Conference, where we brought in a gentleman. His name was Phil Boyd. Incredible champion of school culture. And he led an entire day with student representatives and board members. And it was just so well received. And we're bringing him back this in 2024 conference. And we're going to do this again. And we're going to invite these students. And the cool thing that happened last conference, we then brought those students at the end of the day. They got to join the opening session for the conference. So they got to see the speaker and see that whole process of what we do at this crazy big conference that we do. So that was a wonderful new thing that we've added, and we're going to do it again, and we're going to keep growing from there. Our future, we have this content for bringing school board students to the board. Now we're working on content for the students. Things that students can do at the board table. So that's next on the agenda. And trying to create more opportunities for students to network these student representatives once we know who they are. And that's next. So it's building and growing, and we can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah, that sounds really, really exciting. Kind of going back to what you were talking about previously, you mentioned that this isn't something like every school board can just randomly adopt in one day and have it and assume it to be a success. How, in your experience, does a board know when they're ready, or how do they know when the pieces are in place to allow for this type of conversation to take place?
That's a great question. And I'll just read a few of these bullet points from this checklist.
Yeah.
Does the board have the time and resources to make a commitment to this representative? Our board meeting agendas get pretty full and pretty packed. Some boards meet once a month. Some boards meet twice a month. There's committee meetings. There's retreats they take. They go to conferences. It has to, number one, they have to make a commitment to creating space on the agenda and creating time. So that's the big one. Have you created policies for these young people? And this policy that we do have a sample policy for that. So putting it into policy creates a real commitment to doing this work. Let's see, are you clear as a board as to why you want to involve the students? So it really takes a board discussion to determine, is this something we really want to do? Is this something that we are committed to do? And I think those three things, just as a board, knowing that this is something that we are all committed to making happen, that will create the space in that agenda to bring them onto the table. The board culture needs to promote this as well. So that culture, and sometimes to shift a board's culture, all it takes is bringing that kid to the board table, because it really does change behaviors, and it really does change the focus, knowing that there's students there listening and students that are willing to give their input. So, but there is a long checklist, but the main thing is just the commitment on behalf of the board, together as a whole, as one voice saying, yep, this is what we want to do.
Yes. And you've touched on this a couple times in your previous answers too, but it is like a form of accountability for these boards to see we have this student who our decisions will directly affect not just the parents of the students and not just, the surrounding community, but the student specifically entering the building every single weekday has to go through, and, that just adds a bit more emphasis on the importance of the work of the board.
That's exactly right. It's a commitment. It is not something that boards should take lightly, and which might be why there's so few so far. But once you've worked the logistics of it out, and once it becomes a part of the board culture, you'll never go back, because they're just such a rich enhancement to a board's work.
I think that, and when you discussed earlier, said that this is not we don't have a school mandate that requires student voices on the board. I honestly think that is a bit of a strength, because as ISB encourages local control of school boards, it sounds like a board who is willing to take that initiative on their own is more likely to succeed than a board being forced to adopt some of this.
You know what, Isaac? I agree. I think in any time that it can be an authentic decision from that local board, the better. And it is more likely, as you said, to succeed. So no, I completely agree with that statement.
It's just one of those things where, sure, right now we have a very low number of school districts who have implemented this, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's more of maybe school districts aren't aware that this is an option, and those that are still putting that infrastructure, so to speak, in place so that they can have a firm foundation to build off of.
And I do think that that's the biggest piece, is awareness. Just the idea that I didn't even know we could do that. Yeah. I didn't know that this was something that we should do. And hopefully with this work that we're going to continue to do and keep bringing students into the mix, that there will be more and more awareness of that. I do believe after conference last 2 years ago, there were 5, 6, 7 boards who did go through that process to bring kids to the table. And from this past conference, if my email is any indication, I think there will be more, which is exciting. So this is just a work in progress.
This is very exciting. So we've got this great new handout that we'll have linked in the description of this podcast for your convenience. Lori, if there are any boards that want to learn some more, are there any additional resources or anyone that should be reaching out to?
They can absolutely reach out to me, lgrant@iasb.com, or give me a call, and I can either connect you with these districts who are doing this great work, but also can talk you through the process, get you this document, and happy to help in any way, and connect you with your field services director, who also can help the board as well.
Absolutely. And if any of the districts mentioned want to come on the podcast and discuss this, we'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you.
Oh, Isaac, I'm so on board with that. I'll give them a call.
Sounds
They'd
good.
be great to hear from.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Lori. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast and discussing bringing student voices to the table.
Thanks for inviting me. So grateful. Thanks, Isaac.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. And thank you for your dedicated volunteer service to public education. If you'd like to stay up to date with future episodes, please consider following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube Music. Have a comment or question? We welcome listener feedback and invite you to leave us a voicemail via the link in the description, or send us a voicemail at communications@iasb.com. Thanks.